The revolving door hadn't finished turning when she stepped in front of him. Tuesday morning, 8:47. The lobby of Hargrove Capital's Chicago Tower caught the early November light, the way expensive things always do. Deliberately, as if the building itself had been designed to remind you what you were and were not. Daniel Croft pushed through the glass with his left hand. His right held his daughter's. Lily was 6 years old, pink dress, small white buttons down the front, carrying a paper crane she had folded on the plane from Rockford with the focused patience of a child who understood certain things required your full attention. The woman cut them off before they had taken 4 steps. White blazer, hair pulled back, name tag that read Caroline, palm out, arm extended, with the practiced ease of someone who had never once been wrong about when to do this. Sir, this entrance is for authorized personnel and confirmed appointments only. The public access door is on the south side of the building. I have an appointment, Daniel said. Her gaze moved to his jacket, then to Lily, then to the crane. With whom? With the full board. They're expecting me at 9. Something crossed her expression. Not quite contempt, not quite amusement, but the controlled version of both that people wear when they want to appear professional while communicating something else entirely. I'm going to need you to step aside, sir. Through the glass behind her, visible on the second floor, 12 people in dark suits sat around a conference table. A single number glowed on the presentation screen. $800 million. Lily tugged his hand. Daddy, are those men going to make us leave? Nobody's making us leave, sweetheart. He was right. But not one person in that lobby understood why. Not yet. In 11 minutes, everything would change. The woman in the white blazer would not finish the workday, and the $800 million upstairs would hang entirely on the word of the man she had just redirected to the south door. Daniel took out his phone. 1 call, 40 seconds, 3 sentences. It had decided wrong. His name was Daniel Croft, and the morning had not started at that glass door. It had started 4 years earlier, in a converted garage in Rockford, Illinois, at 2 a.m, where Daniel sat at a folding table with a legal pad, a cold cup of coffee, and the specific kind of silence that settles over a man who has nothing left to lose and has only recently made peace with that fact. The garage had no heat. He wore his father's old work jacket, brown leather worn at the cuffs, and wrote in the margins of a contract proposal until the ink ran dry, then switched to pencil and kept writing. His father, Raymond, had spent 31 years as a machinist in a factory outside Peoria, retiring with a handshake and a watch that stopped working the following winter. His mother had cleaned offices in downtown Chicago 3 nights a week until her knees gave out. They were people who believed in the dignity of working hard for someone else, and they had raised Daniel to believe the same thing. For a long time he did. Then Claire died. She was 34. A Wednesday in March. An aneurysm that arrived with no warning and no apology. Not like a storm you can see coming, but like a wall you walk into in the dark. Lily was 17 months old. Daniel spent the weeks afterward on the specific autopilot that grief installs in people who have no choice but to keep moving. He fed her, he bathed her, he sat beside her crib at night and listened to her breathe. Grief did not make him ambitious. Lily did. Not ambition in the way people romanticize it, not hunger or fire. Just a father looking at a little girl and understanding, with the cold clarity that loss leaves behind, that whatever world she was going to grow up in, he was going to have to build it himself. Croft Infrastructure Solutions started with 1 contract. By year 2, 12 contracts across northern Illinois. By year 4, 47 employees, 2 declined acquisition offers, and a quiet, unannounced position as the leading independent infrastructure firm in the Midwest. He never moved into a bigger office. He never stopped driving the same truck. He still wore his father's jacket, the one Lily called the thinking jacket, because she had only ever seen him wear it when something important was happening. This morning she had watched him put it on without asking why. The $800 million Hargrove contract was the largest municipal infrastructure deal in Illinois history. When the invitation arrived, Daniel read it twice, set it down, then called his site manager in Rockford, not to celebrate, to make sure Tuesday's jobs were covered while he was gone. What he did not know was that Preston Hale was already at the second-floor window, watching a woman in a white blazer raise her palm at a man in a worn leather jacket, and had not yet decided what to do about it. Preston Hale had not built his reputation by moving quickly. He was 53 years old, silver-haired, and had spent 22 years at Hargrove Capital doing the one thing most people in his position mistook for patience, but was in fact something different: the deliberate practice of watching a situation fully before deciding what it meant. He had approved deals worth billions on the strength of that practice. He had also walked away from deals worth billions for the same reason. The people who understood him said he read rooms the way other men read contracts, for what was hidden between the lines, not what was printed on them. He stood at the second-floor window with both hands in his pockets and watched the lobby below. He saw Caroline move. He saw the arm go up. He saw the security guards appear with the practiced ease of men responding to a signal they had received before. He saw the man in the leather jacket stand perfectly still, and he saw the little girl in the pink dress look up at her father, and something in him went quiet in the way it always did when he was about to learn something important. He had reviewed Daniel Croft's proposal 3 times. The first time because his acquisitions team flagged it as an outlier, too small a firm, too little institutional backing. The second time because the numbers were so clean he thought his team had missed something. They hadn't. The third time because he wanted to understand the mind behind the math, and by the end of that reading, he had decided this was the only proposal in the final round, written by someone who had actually stood inside the problem rather than modeled it from a distance. He had told no one that. Below him, the man in the leather jacket responded to Caroline without raising his voice, without shifting his weight, without doing any of the things people do when they feel cornered. He simply stood there, his daughter's hand in his, with the particular stillness of a man who had learned that patience was not the absence of urgency, but the decision to let clarity arrive on its own schedule. Preston recognized that stillness. It was the same quality he had been trying to find in boardrooms for 20 years and almost never did. Inside the lobby, Marcus Webb, 26, junior analyst, 18 months out of Northwestern, stood near the elevator bank, close enough to hear every word. He had grown up watching his father run a small electrical contracting firm, ignored by every room it entered until the work forced the room to reconsider. He knew the jacket. He knew the stillness. He knew exactly what was happening. He pulled out his phone and held it, trying to decide. If you have ever stood in a room watching something wrong unfold, close enough to act, not sure if you had the right, this story is for you. Subscribe, because what Marcus decided in the next 30 seconds would matter more than anyone in that lobby could have predicted. Against the south wall, Irene, building concierge, 20 years at Hargrove, 53 years old, stood behind her desk with her hands flat on the surface and her eyes on the man in the leather jacket. She had a daughter Lily's age. She looked at the paper crane, then looked away. The lobby had become the kind of room that forms when people sense something is wrong and wait, each for their own reason, for someone else to name it first. Nobody did. And then Lily looked up at Caroline and opened her mouth. Her voice was clear the way children's voices are in quiet spaces. Not loud, not performed, just honest in the specific way that has not yet learned to protect itself. Are you not letting my daddy in because of his jacket? The lobby did not go silent all at once. It went silent one sound at a time, until the only thing left was the low hum of the ventilation and the mechanical tick of the elevator bank. Caroline's arm, still extended toward the south door, did not move. Her expression moved instead, something crossing it that was not quite shame and not quite recognition, but lived carefully in the space between them. She did not answer Lily. She looked at Daniel instead. And that choice, that one small automatic redirection, was its own kind of answer. And every adult in that lobby understood it without needing it explained. Daniel crouched down to his daughter's level, right there in the center of the marble floor, with the security guards on either side of him and Caroline's arm still pointed at the south door. He went to one knee and looked at Lily directly. He kept his voice low and even, the way he always did when he needed her to feel that the world's confusion was not her fault and was not going to reach her. "You remember what I told you about the paper crane?" She looked at it and back at him. Her fingers tightened around it slightly. "That it doesn't matter what it's made of. It's still the same crane." "That's right," he said, "same crane." He held her gaze until she nodded, the slow, considered nod of a child who has decided to trust an answer she doesn't yet fully understand, and then he stood. Marcus, near the elevator bank, had stopped looking at his phone. Irene, at the concierge desk, had gone completely still, hands flat on the surface, eyes fixed somewhere just above the marble. The taller of the two security guards, the one on Daniel's left, had shifted his weight backward in a way that had nothing to do with his position and everything to do with something inside him that had become quietly, deeply uncomfortable with where he was standing. Caroline lowered her arm, not because anyone told her to, because she had simply run out of things to do with it. Daniel did not look at her. He looked past her, upward deliberately, at the second-floor window, at the silver-haired man who had been standing there without moving for the past 5 minutes. Preston Hale looked back at him. Neither man spoke. They were too far apart for words, and both of them understood that words were no longer the point. What moved between them in those few charged seconds was the specific, wordless recognition of two people who have each correctly understood what the other one truly is, and what this morning has been about from the very beginning. Preston turned from the window. Daniel watched him go. He reached down, took Lily's hand with one arm, and adjusted the paper crane in her fingers with the other so it wouldn't crumple, and stood waiting, calm, still, for what came next. The elevator chimed. Every head in the lobby turned. Preston Hale crossed the lobby the way he crossed every room, without urgency, without performance, with the settled authority of a man who had already made his decision and was simply moving to execute it. He did not look at Caroline. He did not acknowledge the security guards. He walked past the reception desk without breaking stride, past the two guards, and stopped directly in front of Daniel Croft. The lobby watched. For 3 full seconds, neither man spoke. Preston looked at Daniel the way he had studied the proposal, carefully, completely, for what was there, rather than what he had expected to find. Then he extended his hand. "Mr. Croft, I apologize for the wait." The shift in the room was not dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was the specific, airless silence of people who have just understood something important about themselves and have not yet worked out what to do inside that understanding. Caroline's arm had dropped at her side. Her body still pointed faintly toward the south door, a posture she became aware of all at once, correcting it in a way that contained everything that needed to be said and said none of it aloud. Marcus, near the elevator bank, exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it. Irene, at the concierge desk, stood with her hands flat on the surface and felt something ease in her chest that she had been holding since the moment Caroline first raised her arm. Preston turned to face the room. His voice was even, which somehow made it harder to absorb, and if he had raised it. "This is Daniel Croft. His firm submitted the strongest infrastructure proposal this company has reviewed in 2 decades. He was invited here as our guest. What happened in this lobby this morning is unacceptable and will not be repeated. I will be addressing it directly." He looked at Caroline once. "My office, after the meeting." Then he turned to Lily. She watched him with the frank, unhurried assessment of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't forming a judgment. She pulled the paper crane closer to her chest and looked between them, working through it. "Is the meeting upstairs?" she asked. "It is," Preston said. She considered this carefully. "Can I bring my crane?" Something moved across Preston Hale's face. Not a smile exactly, but the thing that lives just before one arrives and decides to stay. "I wouldn't leave it down here." Subscribe, because what Daniel said in that room upstairs made 3 board members go completely silent and changed the contract in a way nobody in that building had been prepared for. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. Daniel presented without notes. Every number from memory, every projection supported by documentation his team had prepared across 14 months. The board had expected polish. They had not expected precision like that. Not from a firm that size, not from a man who had driven himself to the meeting in a 7-year-old truck with his daughter in the passenger seat. When the presentation ended, Preston asked what terms Daniel required. Daniel named his price. It was fair. It was not negotiable. The room accepted it in the time it takes a room to understand that a number has already been decided, and the conversation is merely ceremony. Then Daniel named one additional condition. Every subcontract awarded under the $800 million deal, every one, had to include a fixed percentage reserved for small, independent, minority-owned firms in the Chicago metro area. Not as a gesture, as a contractual requirement, audited quarterly, reported publicly. Silence settled over the table. One board member near the far end drew a breath that suggested an objection was forming. Preston raised one hand, barely. The breath released. The objection did not arrive. "Draft it into the agreement," Preston said. Caroline was not dismissed. Daniel had not asked for that. She was reassigned, moved from the lobby into an internal compliance role, specifically charged with rewriting Hargrove's guest reception and security protocols from the ground up. People who worked alongside her in the months that followed said she took it seriously in a way that made clear she understood precisely why she was there. She never spoke publicly about the morning. She didn't need to. The work said it for her. At 4 p.m, Daniel and Lily walked back through the lobby toward the exit. Lily looked up at the ceiling, at the marble, at the art on the walls. "Daddy," she said, "did you like it in here?" He looked down at her. "I like that you were here," he said. 6 months later, a letter arrived at Croft Infrastructure's Rockford office. No return address. 3 sentences. The last one stopped him completely. She had found the address herself and mailed it on plain paper in careful handwriting. She wrote that she had stood behind that concierge desk for 20 years and had watched the lobby sort people by how they arrived so many times she had stopped seeing it as wrong. She wrote that watching Lily ask her question, quiet, unhurried, completely honest, was the first time in years she had felt ashamed of her own silence. She had applied for early retirement. She was going to do something different. She didn't say what. The last line read, "Your daughter is going to change things. I hope she knows that." Daniel folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer beside a paper crane. Not the one from that morning, but one Lily had made him the following week and left without explanation. He sat with both for a long time. There is a version of this story about power, who holds it, and what happens when a room discovers it was wrong. But that is not the story Daniel Croft lived. His story was quieter and harder. It was about walking into a room that had already decided what you were and refusing, without anger, without performance, to become it. Lily had a word for that. She called it staying yourself. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. We tell stories like this one every week about the people the world almost missed.